Welcome, Wapham crew, new listeners, guys, gals, go schools, whoever else may be listening this evening. Thank you so much for joining us here at We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Make sure you secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a Rocky Mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. I'm your host, TessaTNT, and we are broadcasting live from the Mile High Clubhouse tonight. I hope you guys have had an amazing weekend so far. And, hope you're all snuggled up. You got your favorite snack, you got your favorite cocktail, whatever it is that you may like to have when you listen to some scary stories. So if you're listening to us live right now, you may be listening to us on We Are Paradox Media. You may also be listening to us on KPNL Radio, which you can find on KPNL Radio at kpnl-db.com. Kind of skipped a beat there. If you want to listen to us on your free time, whether you're working it, or working out, hi Jason! Make sure you tune in to us under We Are Paradox Media once more at Spreaker, Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Castbox, Tumblr, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, Deezer, Castbox, Podcast Addict, Podcast Chaser, and Podvine. We're also live once again on YouTube. That's where the lovely Jason Mathis is. Make sure you mosey on over to our YouTube. Please subscribe, like any video that you have watched or listened to. And leave us comments. Who would you like us to have as a future guest? I want to know, because I am an inquiring mind. So as I was speaking of, we have this book, Death, A History of Man's Obsession and Fears. It's been pretty good so far. I've been enjoying it. What about you? Let me know. I know you like story time, but how about story time on shrooms? No, I'm just kidding. Oh yeah. So shit, I'm trying to figure out where we left off. Bookmark is facing this way. So maybe it's under alternative explanations? But it was this way right here. Oh yes, I did read that, I remember that. Ew, a dung heap. Holy shnikes. It's pretty nasty. And let me know what the sound sounds like. Is it better tonight? I've been having issues with this banana. But I love it. But I'm just like, man, like my old boss, Dave Scott, used to say, you're a button pusher, aren't you? So when I'm unsure, I will push a bunch of buttons. So A1, A2, A3, B1, B2. I want to cover all the bases. But it's looking pretty good. Looking pretty good. I think I may need to turn down the musica, the background music here. So let me turn this down just a smidge. Guess what, guys? Spring is coming. It's gonna be coming this next month. I can't wait. I can't wait for spring. I don't know. Generally, spring used to mean it would rain a lot, but I'm just sick and tired of this cold and the snow and all these other things. Come on. Maybe I need to take this cover off. Let me look back here again. Yep, read that. Okay. Buried alive. So alternative explanations. To unbelievers, such phenomenon had less macabre explanations. The different positions taken up by corpses were much more likely to be the result of externally imposed movements, bumping into walls whilst negotiating the coffin down narrow stairwells, or sudden movements produced by shying or bolting funeral horses. Indeed, one story tells of a wife who regained consciousness as a consequence of the pallbearers banging her beer against the corner of a house. Or is it beer? Beer. I'm going to say beer. Beer's good. Some years later, when the woman was truly deceased, her husband implored the funeral director, "Pray, gentlemen, be careful in turning corners." You don't want that wench to wake up, right? Contorted facial agonies were nothing more than the effects of rigor mortis. The coffin noise was caused by the movement of gases produced by the putrefying body. Jason knows all about bodies, don't ya? Ew. It's nasty. Such noxious eructations were the true explanation for a variety of manifestations, taken by the simple-minded as proof of premature burial. The muffled cry for help was no more than a post-mortem belch, and a buildup of gases under pressure might cause blood to flow out of the mouth or from the nose, or a baby to be expelled from the womb. If the pressure was too great, it could easily cause rupture of the coffin itself, giving the erroneous impression that the lid had been broken by its inmate in their mad endeavor to escape. Monsieur de Vergy, the physician at the Paris morgue in the last century, contended that the gas generated in corpses, which had lain a long time in water, was so powerful as to heave up the cadavers from their tables and hurl them to the ground. A common tactic of disbelievers was to report this xenophobia. Penitents, especially the French, were thought by the British to be irredeemably naive in their acceptance of apocrypha. There were, of course, alternative explanations for the deaths themselves. Death's counterfeits. Catalepsy is a mysterious condition characterized by immobility of the muscles, which can sometimes be mistaken for death. The limbs have a waxy flexibility and can be molded into bizarre positions where they remain indefinitely. Catalepsy can occur in hysteria, in hypnotism, and used to be common in schizophrenia before the advent of effective drug treatment. To Delphus, Virginia, was given the English language, a behavior specifically designed to fool one's enemies by mimicking death when attacked. The possum will fall to the ground and roll itself into a ball, mouth hanging open and eyes fixed in a vacant stare, pretending to be dead and hoping that its enemy will be sufficiently duped to leave it alone. When the danger has passed, the bundle of fur suddenly revives and scampers away. Playing possum has saved many a soldier in the aftermath of battle, when the victors roam the field doing to death anyone still showing signs of life. Thanatomimesis is the name given to bodily states that may be mistaken for death. The word is derived from the Greek thanatos, meaning death, and mimos, meaning imitation. Thanatomimesis is not the same as sham death or playing possum, because these two descriptions imply a deliberate intention to deceive. What then are the conditions that may be misdiagnosed as death? Just checking my sound real quick. Looking good. You looking good, girl. Yeah, you keep going with that. Faints and trances. Fainting or syncope is the commonest of death's counterfeits. It is rarely prolonged and the patient recovers without serious after effects, usually. In 1848, as King Louis Philip of France was leaving the Tuileries to go into exile, the bodies of 3 National Guards lay at the gates of the garden near the Place de la Concorde. They had probably fainted in the garden near the Place de la Concorde. Wishing to spare the king any fresh grief, some persons good-naturedly buried these bodies under a heap of sand. When they were extricated some hours after, one of the men was still alive. Petrarch, the 14th century Italian poet and humanist, is an object lesson to those who advocate hasty burial. When he lived in Ferrara, Petrarch fell into a profound state of trance. The law at the time decreed that, for the sake of hygiene in hot climates, the dead had to be buried within 4 hours of death. Ew, that's not good. Is the internet going okay? Let me get a hold of Vern really quick and tell these kids to get off the internet. Can you please have Joe get off the internet and make sure he's just playing a game or something? Because the internet is really sucking right now. Period. Thanks, babe. Love ya. Alright. So, as the funerary preparations were being made, the servants were stunned to hear the voice of their deceased master complaining about the drop. It is salutary to reflect on the loss to world literature of the poet's house had been better insulated. Trance and coma differ in degree. It is generally accepted that in coma, the sleep-like state is deeper, more likely to be irreversible, than in a trance. There is little doubt that in many of the examples cited as instances of premature burial, people had fallen into trances or comas. Similar in many respects to the mental and physical inertia produced in hibernating animals. The fate of a comatose patient may well depend on the patience and vigilance of relatives and the legal time limits placed on the interval between death and burial. Benjamin Disraeli, Queen Victoria's favorite prime minister, was prone to fits of giddiness in his younger days and once fell into a trance from which he did not recover for a week. Likewise, the mother of General Lee, Confederate soldier in the American Civil War. Lady Burton, wife of the famous explorer, was also given to falling into trances. But perhaps the most celebrated case was that of Marguerite Bosenval, the dormouse of Menelaus, who remained in a trance for 20 years. That's a long freaking time. Long freaking time. Holy shnikes, 20 freaking years. That makes no sense. So where was I? Yes. Got that. In 1883, when Marguerite was 21 years old, a friend told her as a joke that the police were coming to arrest her. She instantly became unconscious. For the next 2 decades, she was tube-fed. On the day before her death, there was an episode of violent twitching of her limbs, after which she opened her eyes and asked after her grandfather, who was long since dead. Not surprisingly, she did not recognize her mother. The effort to speak and rouse herself seemed more than the enfeebled frame could bear, and she ceased to breathe at 9 o'clock in the morning. Mademoiselle Bosenval illustrates the difficulty of distinguishing between bona fide trance and the self-induced variety that is sometimes seen in people diagnosed as hysterics. Much has been written and is still being written about hysterical paralysis. The hysterical state of unconsciousness is often preceded by an episode of strong emotion, frequently perceived by the patient as threatening and for which a trance-like state may serve as a short or long-term solution. Marguerite correctly may have thought that not even the French police would put an unconscious person in the gaol. Another case with hysterical overtones was cited by Mackay and concerned a young woman in the eye of her marriage. The doctor was of the opinion that the girl had died from excitement, overjoy, it is said, at the prospect of being married, but the legal name for the catastrophe was disease of the heart. And with this verdict, her place in society was declared vacant. The girl was duly buried, but noises from within the coffin prompted the bridegroom to prise off the lid. The girl was found in an attitude of horror and pain impossible to describe. Her eyes wide open, her teeth clenched, her hands clutching her hair. Perhaps, just perhaps, the young lady's secret anxieties about sex had induced in her an hysterical paralysis in order to delay the ceremony. Unfortunately, her solution was too permanent. Sentient corpses. Many people who revive from trances just in time to escape the grave give accounts of having been fully aware of what was going on around. It would appear that physical underactivity can be accompanied by physical overactivity. The experience of Edward Stapleton, as related in Poe's short story, The Premature Burial, is typical. Stapleton, a London attorney, died of typhus in 1831. When asked, his friends declined permission for a post-mortem, and so the doctors, putting education above ethics, resolved to disinter Stapleton and dissect him at leisure. On the third night after the funeral, the deceased had a visit from the resurrectionists, aka grave robbers, who transferred the corpse to the operating theater of a private hospital. At about dawn, the doctors decided to proceed with the dissection. A student, however, eager to test out a theory, insisted on applying the terminals of a battery to the chest muscles of the cadaver. Someone made an incision in the pectoral muscle, whilst another plunged a bare wire into the incision. With electrical contact established, the patient arose from the table, stepped into the middle of the floor, gazed about him uneasily for a few seconds, and then spoke. The words he uttered were unintelligible, but the effort required to speak at all was exhausted. He was so exhausted that he fell heavily to the floor. Mr. Stapleton declares that at no period was he altogether insensible, that duly and confusedly he was aware of everything which happened to him, from the moment he was pronounced dead by his physicians to the time he fell swooning to the floor of the hospital. "I am alive," were the uncomprehended words which, upon recognizing the locality of the dissecting room, he had endeavored in his extremity to utter. One little girl quoted by Borodale was mortified, well, almost, to hear her sister jumping up and down at the prospect of getting her necklace. Miss Eleanor Markham, writing of her experiences in Banner of the Light in 1894, said, "I was conscious all the time you were making preparations to bury me, and the horror of my situation was altogether beyond description. I could hear everything that was going on, and even whisper outside the door, and although I exerted all my willpower and made a supreme physical effort to cry out, I was powerless." Dr. Chu of Calcutta died in 1874, soon after his favorite sister was carried off with convulsions. He had attended her funeral and was so overcome with grief that he collapsed headlong into her grave and fainted away. Dr. Chu relates his own demise thus: I died, as was supposed, on January 1874, and was laid out for burial. I had been in this state for 20 hours, and in another 3 hours would have been closed up forever, when my eldest sister, who was leaning over the head of my coffin and crying over me, declared she saw my lips move. The friends who had come to take their last look at me tried to persuade her that it was only fancy, but she persisted. Dr. Donaldson was sent for to convince her that I was really dead. For some unexplained reason, he had me taken out of the coffin and examined very carefully from head to foot, noticing a peculiar soft, fluctuating swelling at the base of my neck. He went to his brougham and got his case. He proceeded to lay upon the tumor and plunged in a tracheotomy tube. A quantity of pus escaped, releasing the pressure on my carotenoids. Restoratives were used, and I was slowly nursed back to life. The tracheotomy tube was not finally removed until September 1875. Not unnaturally, Dr. Chu henceforth was overly preoccupied with the risks of premature burial. But this does not adequately explain why he found the need to open up his family vault 10 years after the death of a 17-year-old relative who had died of cholera. He found the coffin lid on the floor, the skeleton half in and half out, with an ugly gash across the right parietal bone, which is the skull. Clothes were draped over the edge of the coffin, and the bent fingers of her right hand were near her throat. Dr. Chu, no doubt remembering the horror of his own close encounter with death, surmised that she had regained consciousness in the tomb, fought for life, forcing her coffin open, and sitting up in the pitchy darkness of the vault, went mad with fright, tore her clothes off, tried to throttle herself, and banged her head against the masonry shelf until she fell forward, senseless and dead. Either that, or she was blown out of her coffin by an explosion of putrefying gases. Fakirs, Western and Eastern. Fakirs are often credited with the power to slow down their bodily metabolism to such an extent that breathing becomes virtually imperceptible. Colonel Townsend was a famous 18th century Englishman who was able by some mechanism under his voluntary control to ape death itself. Dr. Cheney, in his book The English Malady in 1733, recounted how he and a colleague were summoned to Townsend's bedside to witness a unique experiment. He was to cause himself to die and return to life. The colonel lay on his back. Cheney checked the patient's pulse. Dr. Banyard placed his hand over the heart, while Mr. Skrine, an apothecary, held a mirror in front of the mouth. For more than half an hour, no pulse or other life sign could be detected. The demonstration was so successful that the 3 attendants were convinced that Townsend had pushed the experiment too far. Just as Cheney was about to make arrangements for disposal of the body, he noticed that the pulse had returned and breathing restarted. Townsend was soon speaking of his near-death experiences. When the professionals had departed, the patient got down to more secular matters. He called his lawyer and added a codicil to his will. Within 8 hours, he was dead. Prolonged periods of suspended animation are seen today in patients suffering from electrocution, hypothermia, or drug overdose, especially barbiturates. Fakir's part. How long might someone be reasonably expected to survive if they were inadvertently sealed in a coffin while in a state of trance? opinions varied greatly. It was generally agreed that the available air would be no more than 3 to 4 cubic feet. Experiments had shown that dogs were able to survive in glass-top coffins for anything up to 6 hours. It was reckoned that a man might last only 20 minutes, but is this not a century of torture? So here's a picture. It's Emma, Countess of Mount Edgecombe, who, after burial in the family vault, regained consciousness when a sexton attempted to steal the rings off her fingers. And this portrait is by Sir Joshua Reynolds, which has since been destroyed. Oh, there she is. Isn't she beautiful? Emma, Countess of Mount Edgecombe. So Emma was born on the 28th July in 1729 and was the only child of John Gilbert, Archbishop of York, and Margaret, sister of the 2nd Earl of Harborough. She married George III, Baron of Edgecombe, and later 1st Earl of Mount Edgecombe, in August 1761. Originally, Mount Edgecombe was in Devon, but a boundary change transferred it to Cornwall in 1844. A most exciting and thrilling story is told regarding this lady, and it began an anonymous account in a bundle of papers sent to me by Robert Mount Edgecombe, the present Earl, and it continued. The story as related to me was that some years before her husband's death, she herself was stricken down by some mysterious illness which proved beyond the ken of the family doctor. And when after a few days she displayed such symptoms which only tended to confirm his worst suspicions and fears, the doctor had no hesitation in conveying to the Earl the sad tidings of the death of the Countess. Accordingly, all the necessary arrangements were made for her burial in the family vault at Market Parish Church, about 3/4 of a mile away at the top of the park. When the day of the funeral arrived, the sexton came to place the body, clothed in a sheet, in the coffin. While so doing, the sexton noticed that the Countess had some very valuable rings on the fingers of the left hand, and feeling that it would be a great pity if they were allowed to remain there forever, decided to waste no time in rectifying the matter. That night, when all was dark and still, he crept down to the family vault and, opening the door, proceeded to unscrew the coffin by the light of a candle. With the lid off, he took the left hand of the corpse and attempted to pull the rings off the fingers. Encountering some difficulty, he pulled more vigorously. To his amazement and horror, the corpse began to sit up. Filled with terror, he let out one shriek and ran away as fast as his legs could carry him, knocking over the candle in his haste, but leaving the door of the vault ajar. The feelings of the poor Countess at finding herself in this astounding predicament must well have been beyond belief. When, awakening from her coma, she found herself in a coffin, alone in her vault, in the pitch black, and wrapped only in a sheet, the shot might well have made the bravest woman die of fright. But the Countess soon realized where she was, and guessing what had happened, slowly and painfully made her way barefooted down a little path towards the house. This path has ever since been called the Countess's Path. When she reached the house, she made her way to the shuttered windows of the dining room. Inside, the family were at dinner, sadly discussing the events of the day. Suddenly, a gentle tapping noise was heard. At first, no one moved. But as the tapping continued, the Earl, whose nerves were very much on edge from the events of the last few days, went to the window. He slowly drew back the shutters and looked upon a white figure standing outside. Thinking he saw a ghost, he uttered a shriek. but when the figure began to speak in the tones of his wife, he summoned up his courage and opened the window. To the amazement of all, in walked the corpse, none the worse for the extraordinary series of adventures which had befallen her. The Countess lived for a long time after the events recounted above, outliving her husband by some 12 years. Her portrait was painted by Sir Joshua Reynolds. Yeah, she looks like she'd be hard to kill for sure. Anticipating disbelief, the author of this account testifies to its accuracy by telling us that it had been told to him by William, 4th Earl of Mount Edgecombe, when the author stayed at Mount Edgecombe House, a boy of 14. More recently, the story had been confirmed by William's granddaughter, the Hon, Mrs. John Parker. It seemed to me that this celebrate case of premature burial, because it involved a member of the aristocracy, was potentially able to be authenticated. One merely had to find evidence of Emma's first demise in the Marker Parish records and of her second and final departure on 26 December 1807, Upper Grosvenor Street, Middlesex. The Marker Parish record of her death would fall between the date of her marriage in 1761 and the date of her husband's death in 1795. The Marker Parish records are held in the Cornwall Record Office in Truro, and the only reference is to the death of the Right Honourable Sophia, Countess of Mount Edgecombe, who died on 17 August 1806, and was interred on 2 September 1806. David Thomas, who searched the records at Truro on my behalf, was sufficiently intrigued to continue delving, and Lake's Parochial History of Cornwall, Volume 3, and the chapter of Marker Parish was a not unfamiliar account of a premature burial given by Holwell, the Cornish historian, and that was 1760 to 1838. We have an astonishing instance of reviviscence in one of the Edgecombe family. I believe the mother of Sir Richard Edgecombe, Knight, who was created first Baron of Mount Edgecombe in 1748. The family were then residing at Cuthill, or Cuthill, in the parish of Colstock. Lady Edgecombe had expired. Her body was deposited in the family vault, not, I suppose, in less than a week after her supposed death. The interment, however, had not long taken place before the sexton, from a motive sufficiently obvious, went down into the vault, and, observing a gold ring on her ladyship's finger, attempted to draw it off, but not succeeding, pressed and pinched the finger, when the body very sensibly moved in the coffin. The man ran off in terror, leaving his lantern behind him. Her ladyship arose, and taking the lantern, proceeded to the mansion house. Of the authenticity of this account there can be no reasonable doubt, as I recollect the narrative as coming from the lips of my grandmother Polwell. This account would suggest that it was not Emma who was buried prematurely, but another Edgecombe lady a century before. As David Thomas says, if this is indeed the case, then it would refer to the Lady Anne Montague, second surviving daughter of Edward, Earl of Sandwich. Sounds delicious. So Emma was really Anne. Unfortunately, the burial register of Marker Church from 1670 to 1694 does not mention Anne. Further, if Anne took the lantern and walked from Marker to Cuthill House, where the family were then residing, the effort would probably have killed her, since the vault and the house are some 10 miles apart. The story of Emma and Anne is told in some detail to illustrate how easily facts dissolve into unsubstantiated surmise. Two ladies in 2 different centuries contend for the little born-again countess, and the authority for such claims often rests on the honesty or recollections of such people as Grandmother Polwell. There was confusion as to the identity of the lady in the trance as long ago as the 1870s. The then Earl had this to say on the subject: "I have never been able to get at the truth of the story, or even the identity of the lady of whom it is told. There is an old lady living at Plymouth now, who says she often heard the story from her husband's grandmother, who was housemaid at Mount Edgecombe at the time, and opened the door for Lady Mount Edgecombe when she walked home the night of her funeral. Considering the number of grandmothers involved, perhaps Mount Edgecombe saga is but an old wives' tale. There is a none too flattering reference to Emma, Lady Mount Edgecombe's age in the Times of January 1790. In an account of the lady's dresses at the Queen's Ball, the reporter comments, in a dress suited to her age and person, conspicuously antique, to set modern elegance at defiance. Her ladyship had on a coquillette satin flounced all over and marked with very broad stripes of sable, gloomy as the view from Mount Edgecombe to Pulverin in hazy weather. No mention is made of the fact that one could be excused for looking antique if one had already been buried once." So this is a picture of Maker Church, from which the Countess made her way back to the house to be reunited with her terrified relatives, none the worse for the extraordinary series of adventures which had befallen her. Very nice. Not only does Emma's identity become doubtful, so also does her nationality. Further reading on the subject of premature burial soon brings to light other candidates in different countries and different centuries. The story of Frau Richmoth Adolk antedates that of Emma and provides the template for all future variations on the theme. This lady died of plague in Cologne in 1571. She revived as the grave digger was attempting to steal her ring. In this case, the maid, a German equivalent of the Plymouth woman's husband's grandmother, opened the door to her former mistress and ran to her master to tell him the momentous news. More cynical than Lord Mount Edgecombe, the husband exclaimed, "It is as impossible for it to be my wife as for my horses to come out of the stable, run up into the garret, and look out the windows." At that moment he chanced to look up to the roof and saw 2 stallions staring back at him. He was instantly convinced, when Frau Reichmuth was truly dead, a monument to commemorate her previous escape was erected in the Church of the Holy Apostles in Cologne. British Emma clones abound, including Lady Wyndham, the mother of the first Earl of Egremont, entombed in the family vault at St. Decumans in Somerset. Before its destruction in the Blitz in the Second World War, Constance Whitney's memorial in St. Giles Church, Cripplegate, London, was alleged to depict her as rising from her coffin, her slumbers disturbed by the cupidity of a sexton. It is more likely, as was attested to by the inscription beneath, that the memorial represented the hope of resurrection of the body and not an example of premature burial. The most amusing variant is told by a French writer, Tallemant, about a certain Baroness de Ponat, who was taken to her family tomb after choking on a fishbone, hotly pursued by a bunch of greedy servants. After they had prized the rings from the fingers, the Baroness's maid, who bore her mistress a particular grudge, vengefully struck the corpse several blows across the neck. The malignity of the maid was the perseveration of the mistress. Out flew the fishbone, and up rose the Baroness, to the complete discomfiture of the domestics. The retributive justice was complete, and the only objection to the narrative is that, like the fishbone, it sticks in the throat. Let us return finally to Emma, David Walsh, and Premature Burial. Fact or fiction, published in 1897, leaves the reader in no doubt that he regards all accounts of burial alive as pure fiction. He characterized the myriad ring cycle accounts as typical of the from our foreign correspondent type of newspaper copy, where the person, supposed and certified as dead, was committed to the grave, discovered, resuscitated, and returned home to eat a hearty breakfast, all within the space of 24 hours. He took particular exception to a letter about Emma written by Arthur Lovell of the London Associate for the Prevention of Premature Burial to the editor of Medical Press and Circular. Lovell cites as evidence for veracity the word of Sir J. Tollemache Sinclair, Bart., formerly Member of Parliament for Caithness, who heard it from a grandson of the Countess. Walsh is scathing. Anyone who advanced as proof of a scientific proposition hearsay evidence of what happened 3 generations back would at once become a general laughingstock. So here's a sketch of St. Giles Church, Cripplegate, London, before it was extensively damaged in World War II, showing Constance Whitney rising up from her tomb after having been buried in a state of suspended animation. This lady, like the Countess of Mount Edgecombe, owed her recovery to the cupidity of a sexton. So here's that picture. Chapter 2. The Moment of Death. In our graveyards, with winter winds blow, there's a great deal of toing and froing. But can it be said that the buried are dead when their nails and their hair are still growing? This anonymous 20th century limerick, composed to highlight moral dilemmas in organ transplantation, neatly illustrates the notion that we die in bits and that the hair and nails continue to grow even after the heart has stopped beating. A certified person as dead does not necessarily imply that all the different cells and all the organs of the body are simultaneously dead. The practical problem is to decide the point at which the process of dying becomes irreversible, regardless of whether the kidneys are still excreting urine or the liver still producing bile. Fortunately, when an Englishman is in doubt about anything, he can always rely on the Bard of Avon to have had some thoughts on the subject. In Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Act 4, Scene 1, the signs of death are listed by Friar Lawrence. No pulse shall keep his native progress, but surcease to beat. No warmth, no breath shall testify thou livest. The roses on thy lips and cheek shall fade. To paly ashes thy eyes' windows fall, like death when he shuts up the day of life. Each part deprived of settled government shall stiff and stark and cold appear like death. There is no single sign that would enable one to diagnose death. Rather, it is a combination of many signs taken together. Insensibility. So a true corpse feels no pain. This fact has been used in the past to help decide if a person is dead or not. In the 19th century, Dr. Josot invented a vicious pair of forceps with sharp claws to pinch into the nipples on the premise that the dead would feel nothing. Another method based on the same principle was to thrust long needles under finger or toenails. Holy shnikes, that'll wake you up. In earlier times, attempts were often made to awaken the dead by arranging for women to gather around the body weeping, wailing, and gnashing their teeth. Winslow says, if possible, shock his ears by hideous shrieks and excessive noises. The truly dead would be oblivious to the cacophony. Whilst on the subject of noses, consider the case of Luigi Vittori, a carabiner in the service of the Pope in the 1870s, who was certified dead after an attack of asthma. A doctor, glancing at the body, fancied he detected signs of life. A lighted taper was applied to the nose. The body was pinched and beaten, and the taper was applied again, and so often and so obstinately that the nose was burned, and the patient, quivering in all his frame, drew short, spasmodic breaths. Sure proves, even to a non-professional witness, that the soldier was not altogether dead. In a short time, the corpse was declared to be a living man. He left the hospital and resumed his duties, but his nose, a scarred and crimson beacon on his face, told till he died, which was soon afterwards, the sad story of his cure in the very jaws of the grave. Gustatory tests are rare, but Winslow suggests pouring vinegar and pepper into the corpse's mouth, and where they cannot be had, it is customary to pour warm urine into it. Ew! Which has been observed to produce happy effects. Well, I don't think so. That sounds gross. Temperature. Corpse is cold to the touch, and temperature is often used by forensic experts to estimate the interval since death took place. There are many pitfalls for the unwary, and it must be remembered that many deeply comatose patients are cold to the touch, while patients with infectious diseases such as cholera may have higher than normal body temperatures even though they are dead. Furthermore, a person dying at home in his own bed is likely to be kept warm by the bedclothes, whereas a hospital patient, quickly transferred to an icy mortuary, will lose body heat rapidly. The likelihood of misdiagnosis is small, but not zero. In the last century, special thermometers called necrometers, or thanatometers, were introduced to aid in the diagnosis of death. The mercury scale was calibrated to indicate that the patient was alive, probably dead, or dead. Physicians warned of the dangers of mistakes if the necrometer was used by anyone other than a qualified doctor. Though one might justifiably ponder the expertise of any physician had recourse to a thermometer which registered dead before he would sign a death certificate. With the unfortunate Luigi Vittori still fresh in the memory, it must be pointed out that hot tapers were often used on other parts of the body besides the nose. Heated flat irons, melted sealed wax, and candle flames have all had their advocates as death tests. Unfortunately, the production of a skin blister has no proof of life, since blisters could be formed by dropping sealing wax onto an amputated limb. A particularly dramatic test was put forward by Dr. Martino of Cordova. He would place a candle flame about half an inch from a finger or toe. If the person was truly dead, the layers of skin would separate to produce an air blister which, when it burst, would suddenly blow out the flame. Unfortunately, a person does not have to be dead for this phenomenon to occur. Bordel favored Mayer's hammer. This entailed dipping an ordinary hammer into boiling water and placing it into the hollow of the abdomen just below the breastbone. It is an excellent means of reviving a person who has fallen in a state of syncope or faint. This is intense. So the mafia mirror test, so beloved of Chicago mobsters, is probably one of the most unreliable of all tests of death. It would not work for King Lear when the body of his daughter Cordelia was brought to him, Act 5, Scene 3. Lend me a looking glass. If that her breath will mist or stain the stone, why then she lives. A few lines later, the regal feather test proved just as inaccurate. This feather stirs, she lives. The third method of detecting respiration is the least known and the least reliable. A glass of water filled to the brim and placed carefully on the end of the breastbone. If the water spills over the edge of the glass, the corpse yet breathes. Unfortunately, posthumous hiccups caused by contraction of the diaphragm, or belching or breaking wind caused by expulsion of intestinal gases, Winslow's fermentative motions of the abdominal humors often resulted in spillage. Circulation. So to most people, death is synonymous with a heart that no longer beats. But this need not be the case, since in the Reign of Terror, during the French Revolution, it was not unusual for someone to have been decapitated but still have a strongly beating heart. Nevertheless, cessation of the beating of the heart is generally the first sign of death, checked out by a doctor. Again, mistakes are not unknown. A heart might beat so feebly as to be practically inaudible, even with a stethoscope and acute hearing. Paradoxically, the longer and more intently one listens, the more difficult it is to distinguish weak beats from a miscellany of crackles and bubbles. I think that's miscellany. Anywho, medical students are familiar with the fancied return of a dead man's beat. In reality, what they are hearing is the sound of their own heart. For those doctors whose hearing is less than perfect, a number of non-auditory aids have been devised to assist in ascertaining when the circulation has ceased. One, invented by Monsieur Mitteldorf, consisted of a 4-inch needle with a flag on the end. The needle was plunged into the heart of the patient. A still beating heart caused the flag to oscillate. Oh, goodness. Thankfully, there were less draconian methods of testing whether the circulation had ceased. The simplest way was to open an artery and observe whether blood flowed or not. If the flow was obviously pulsating, the heart was still beating. If there was an even continuous flow, death was more likely. A simpler test of circulation, propounded by Dr. Magnus in 1872, is to tie a piece of string tightly around the finger. If the blood is still circulating, the end of the finger will become blue and swollen. If the finger remains white, death is more probable. This is insanity. But anywho's, boys and girls, we do have to go to our first music break. On this break, we have the lovely and talented Mr. Jeff Hilliard. He's going to be singing Abandoned, Silicone Wave, Finger Bang Your Day, and Consensual Sex Van. And then we have Cockroach from the UK with I See You. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
I gave you my You're probably today. In the window, are you smiling? Your husband and your beautiful family. Tell me, does he know about the way we made love on the night you met me? At Johnny's Tavern on 37 last Thursday. You said hello. Are you my Uber driver, baby? I said yeah. Then you asked if I wanted to party. I got an 8-ball from my friend Noel. We trauma bonded in a cheap motel. We laughed, we cried, we came multiple times. The sex blew my mind. I ain't no puppet doll. I believe in the power of love. One night is not enough. How could you abandon our love? You left me high and dry. You didn't even say goodbye. Now I screamed into the night. How could you abandon something that's so right? The way you touch me, the way you love me.
I just got a package, I can't wait to get home. I spent all day tracking the shipment of my phone, all that she was lacking. I ordered custom, I can't wait to get some. Take it to the bedroom, bitches always nagging. Now I got the air, I send the bitches packing. Going my way, I have a new attraction. Don't care what you say, it's better in every way. Now baby, it's time to play. We're gonna make us a tape and show everyone the way. Cause I'm going 'cause I'm going my own way. Riding up Silicon Way. The whole scene on the game. With my new real dog, I'm gonna play. Just second way to my Silicon Way. She is here to stay. She's my new real dog, and it's time to play. With my new real dog, I'm gonna play. She's my new real dog, and it's time to play.
The woman of my dreams.
Voulez-vous coucher avec moi?
Fais-moi l'amour.
Je suis amoureux.
Je pense toujours à
Enchanté,
tu es charmant.
ma chérie. Mon
Tu es
futur
charmant.
dynastie.
Tu
Ils étaient le nipple.
es chaud. Fais-moi
It's like living on a super yacht, making love to a robot. It's like owning a football team, but having sex with a robot. It's like winning an Oscar and Emmy, a Grammy, when you're fucking a robot. It's like saving a family with a newborn from a fire, but you're fucking a robot. I'm going my own way, riding up Silicon Way. The whole scene on the game. With my new real dog, I'm gonna play. Just second way to my Silicon Way. She is here to stay. She's my new real dog, and it's time to play.
When your life is a never-ending train wreck, and you feel like you're drowning in a sea of regret, with a bit of oppression pressing down on your neck, it hurts so bad. When your overwhelming hatred kills your heart's desire, and reality starts looking like a dumpster fire, you start bitching to me, but you're preaching to the choir. You don't need to be so mad. 'Cause sometimes we hurt, sometimes we cry, sometimes we're sure there's no reason to try. When the whole world goes completely insane, open your heart, stand up and sing. I'm gonna finger bang my day. Yeah, yeah. I'll finger bang my day. That's right. You gotta make the choice to give it all you've got, and make your day moan with pleasure, really make it hot. Because your day deserves a lover that pulls out the stops. Come on, it's not so hard. 'Cause sometimes we hurt, sometimes we cry, sometimes we sure there's no reason to try. When the whole world blows up in our face, what else could we do but stand up and sing? I'm gonna finger bang my day. Yeah, yeah. Finger bang my day.
Hey, what are we really doing? We can't live in a world that has this much hate. We have to get honest with ourselves. We have to take stock in what our part is in all of this madness. We have to let go. And we focus on giving love, setting that intention. And each and every single one of us gets up every day with the intention to give love. And we do it. We go out there and we give love every single day. Each one of us gets out there and makes love to our day, giving our day a multiple orgasm. The whole world will be orgasmic for the rest of eternity. Sometimes we hurt, sometimes we cry, sometimes we should. There's no reason to try when the whole world is fucking insane. We open our hearts, stand up and sing. I'm gonna finger bang my day. Finger bang my day. Finger bang my day. Let's open our hearts, stand up and sing. I'm gonna finger bang my day. Yeah, yeah. Finger bang my day. Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? Let me take you far away from all this huff and puff. There will be nothing in between our love, like a pair of doves flying high above, where nothing can touch us, touching softly. Don't let me go, I won't let you go. This is eternity with me, baby. Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? You don't have to be alone. Come with me. Magic, healthy laughter, boundaries, safe space, ongoing mutual consent, passion, happily will be bearing our souls, naked by the sea. We'll breathe the clean air. We'll be living, laughing, loving forever. Baby, do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? You don't have to be alone anymore. We will be together forever in love. Do you wanna go for a ride? Do you wanna go in my consensual? Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Just get in the van.
Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us once again on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies, where we're going to continue to read this book, which is Death by Mr. Robert Wilkins, and it's a history of man's obsessions and fears. So we're going through the different parallels of death, the different levels, etc. The next one we're discussing is rigor mortis. I keep wanting to say Rick and Morty, but when a person dies, the majority of the muscles of the body become flaccid. A dramatic depiction of this limpness is Michelangelo's Pieta in Florence, which shows Christ being supported with hanging head, pendulous arms, and buckled legs. It is claimed that flaccidity of the jaw follows very soon after death, the lower jaw of the corpse falling open. Borodel bemoaned the fact that this was so often overlooked by actors. In a performance of Julius Caesar at Her Majesty's Theatre a few years ago, Caesar's body, after he was stabbed and supposed to be dead, lay supine, and with the mouth closely shut. It was difficult to believe that he was not shamming. The relaxation of the facial muscles often produces a calm and serene countenance. Byron's mild, angelic air, which is often so reassuring to the bereaved, when relatives die after days of struggle and pain, later muscular contraction, or contraction, dissipates the charm, knits the brow, and draws down the mouth, pinching the features, and changes a soft and soothing expression into a look of profound suffering. It was in this state of the superior's agony, the terror that Sir Walter Scott had misfortune to view on the face of his dead wife. So the famous Wilkins case of a 45-year-old found dead, standing upright in the corner of a timber yard. The normal muscular flaccidity which follows death has been replaced by a remarkable and instantaneous cadaveric rigidity. Here's that picture. And this music still seems a little too high. So after a variable period of time, the flaccid muscles become stiff and rigid, and this gives rise to rigor mortis, in which the joints of the body become fixed. The rigidity is such that the body may be moved like a plank of wood. The fingers often become clenched at this point. The muscles around the hair roots often shorten and stiffen and result in goose pimples. It is almost as if a corpse is showing sensitivity to the cold. Rigor mortis usually starts in the neck and jaw and then spreads throughout the body, up to the face, down both arms, and into the chest, abdomen, and legs. When rigor mortis passes off and the muscles become soft and flaccid for the second and final time, the relaxation starts in the jaw and proceeds in the same order. The stiffness of the joints and rigor mortis can be overcome. The sufficient force in elbow joint or knee joint can be broken. There has been debate over the centuries about the time it takes for rigor mortis to develop after death, or even if rigor mortis always follows death. Haller, a man in whom scientific curiosity coexisted with profound grief, tested the muscles of his daughter for 48 hours after her death before declaring that he could not find any evidence of rigor mortis. When rigor mortis is present, it usually starts within 1 to 6 hours after death and commonly spreads to involve all the muscles of the body within a few 4 to 10 hours. The whole process is accelerated in hot climates, and when someone dies after a period of intense muscular activity, such is death in physical combat. In cold conditions, short of freezing, rigor mortis is often slow to develop. The muscles of skiers killed in the Alps may remain supple for long periods of time. There is an important exception to the sequence of primary flaccidity, rigor mortis, secondary flaccidity, and it is a favorite of crime writers. Muscles which were already clenched at the point of death stay clenched and do not exhibit the initial flaccidity described above. It is for this reason that people who shoot themselves are found with their fingers tightly clutching a revolver. The same phenomenon is seen when drowning men die clutching weeds, or murder victims grasp the hair or clothing of their assailant in their clenched hands. On occasions, the whole body becomes frozen immediately after death, and cases are recorded of soldiers killed in action being found fixed in the act of sighting their rifles. At Balaklava, a cavalry officer charged on for some time, erect in the saddle, sword drawn and leveled, despite the fact that he was quite dead and decapitated. There are a number of cases of known people dying whose whole body stiffens immediately without the initial period of flaccidity. There was a famous case of a woman in Germany who died standing up and whose body, instead of falling limply to the ground, remained stiff and upright. Two other bizarre death tests depend on muscles. The first was described by Dr. Colonus of 1862, who asserted that if you put the finger of a living person into your ear, two distinct noises can be heard. Both sounds are described as rolling and are produced by the slight movements of the finger muscles. It follows then that if you wish to ascertain the moment of death, you have only to stick one of the patient's fingers in your ear. When all fall silent, the patient is dead. The second test makes use of the fact that the sphincter muscles of the anus relax after death. It is mentioned in John Snart's Thesaurus of Horror, published in 1817. The test used by the Turkish physicians seems very simple and natural, for they never think a subject dead or even hopeless, while there is any irritability or contractile power in the sphincter or ani muscle. The test may be easily performed by taking an ox or pig's bladder with a tube attached to its orifice and inflating it in the usual way by blowing air into it from the mouth. It's so gross. In cold weather, the bladder may be moderately heated by immersion in hot water or by holding it in front of a fire. The tube is then inserted into the mouth of the patient and air forced down the throat by compressing the bladder, while an assistant holds the nose and lips closed. Ew. Death would be diagnosed by a flatus passed through an anus whose sphincter muscle had lost its contractibility. Snart continues, it is scarcely requisite to say that the subject, for obvious reasons, should not be laid on a bed or other soft surface while this experiment is made. This appears so simple a test that it ought never to be omitted. Even if all other trials have failed, it is within everyone's power to try it. So convinced was Snart of the infallibility of this test that he extracted a solemn promise from his daughter to carry it out in order to be sure that he was dead, and upon the discharge of his paramount duty alone depends his future blessing and your welfare. And dreadful would it be to reflect that you had violated your father's dying injunction. The invention of the electric coil seemed to answer the prayers of those people fearful of being misdiagnosed as dead. The solution was simple. The terminals of such a coil would be applied to the muscle of the presumed corpse. Any muscular contraction would indicate that the diagnosis of death had been somewhat premature. At one time, there was pressure from every parish priest to possess a Ruhmkorff's coil in order to test the muscular contractibility before proceeding with the funeral ceremony. Unfortunately, the test is based on a false premise. Post-mortem muscle facial contortions can easily be produced in a dead person by the application of electrodes to either side of the mouth. Ironically, one of the effects of rigor mortis is actually thought by some to be a sign of continuing life rather than advanced death. It was a popular notion that discharge of semen was proof that a man still lived. In fact, the phenomenon was the result of the contraction of rigor mortis in the muscle tubules of the testicles. Putrefaction. So putrefaction is the process which results in the gradual bacterial dissolution of the body into gases and liquids. It is often cited as the only truly infallible test of death. The first sign of putrefaction is the appearance of a greenish discoloration of the skin in the lower right side of the abdomen, roughly in the region of the appendix. This is due to staining of the skin by blood seeping through the walls of vessels. The pressure of gases produced by the decomposing body can force out stomach contents, expel a baby from the womb, tear the abdomen asunder, or even burst apart the coffin. Expanding gases are also held responsible for a large number of Egyptian mummies found with rectal and vaginal prolapses. Borodel says when these gases are diffused abroad, they create an abdominal swelling. To avoid this tainting of the atmosphere, I prick the bodies to let the gas escape. Then I set light to them at the pricks, and long bluish flames start forth, like those of a blowpipe. Prior to 1882, before the Paris Morgue had its refrigeration apparatus, phosphorated hydrogen produced a will-o'-the-wisp phenomenon, which could be seen running over and around the bodies. The final stage of putrefaction is liquefaction of the body organs. The eyes are affected first, followed by the brain, stomach, and liver. The womb liquefies last. This fact often enables pathologists to tell the sex of a body long after the subsequent putrefaction. So the rate of putrefaction after burial depends on a number of factors, including the length of time from death to burial, the type of soil, and the depth of the grave. A well-known dictum states 1 week in air equals 2 weeks in water equals 8 weeks buried in the ground. And this accurately reflects the ease with which microbes and other opportunists such as flies, beetles, and maggots, you dirty bastards, are able to start the process of decomposition. Some remarkably well-preserved cadavers exhumed in Transylvania prompted Dr. Nathaniel Schrock to investigate the subject of premature burial and to publish his results in the Transylvania Journal of Medicine in 1835. So before we turn this page, this is showing the shock factor and the contraction of the facial muscles following the application of an electric current 45 minutes post-mortem, and it shows the fallibility of this method of determining death. So yeah, this guy looks like he's in pain, but he's obviously dead. Poor guy. Fucking science is weird, but I like it. Oh, to retard putrefaction, there was a brief vogue for India rubber coffins in the last century. Despite the supposed impermeability of such coffins, the bodies contained within them generally succumb to putrefaction. Putrefaction. The body is destroyed in 3 or 4 years, and there is a formed liquid greasy substance. Ew. Like black axle grease, which rolls about, and when the coffin is opened gives forth an abominable stench. So obsessed were Europeans with the misdiagnosis of death and the consequent risk of premature burial that frequent competitions were held to identify simple and reliable ways of differentiating a live body from a corpse. In 1846, Dr. Bouchot won 1,500 francs merely for suggesting the stethoscope. What? In 1885, the French Academy of Sciences awarded a prize to Dr. Mays for his protracted deliberations, which finally came up with the answer putrefaction. And in 1900, Dr. Eckard of Marseilles recommended injection beneath the skin of a weak solution of fluorescein. In the dead, there was no effect, but if a person is alive, the whole of the skin goes yellow and the eyes green. I'm smelling a lawsuit. 20th century update. If the concept of the moment of death is such a legal fiction, when can it be said that a person is really dead, freeing his or her organs for transplantation into others? In the years immediately following 1967, when Professor Bernard carried out the first heart transplant operation, many people began to worry about the Montezuma syndrome. Montezuma was an Aztec king who, besides revenging himself on Europeans by inducing severe diarrhea, used to propitiate the sun god with human sacrifices. Still beating hearts were scooped out of 20,000 living victims during his reign. After Bernard, the media frequently whipped up fears of modern-day Montezumas. Eager for riches and fame, roaming intensive care wards on the lookout for donor hearts to implant, regardless of whether the donor was truly dead or only nearly so. Brain tracings have gone a long way to lessen the public's fears, the ghoul image giving way to a re-establishment of a surgeon's integrity. Nevertheless, since there is still no absolute foolproof test of death, surgeons have to remain vigilant against an over-hasty diagnosis of irreversible death based on flat brain tracings and have to be constantly aware of the profound death-like but reversible conditions produced by hypothermia, drug overdoses, e.g. aspirin, and head injuries. There is no place or necessity for a hasty diagnosis of death. The transplant surgeon is only too aware of the maxim pertaining to organ removal. If in doubt, don't. Chapter 3. Cautions taken against premature burial. In previous centuries, the surest way to avoid being buried alive was to obtain personal services of a doctor who could be trusted enough to actually view a corpse. Many of the instances of burial alive were the consequence of misdiagnosis by relatives or by absentee physicians who, perfectly legally, were not obliged to examine the body. A certificate of death needed only to state, "John Smith died as I am informed." The obvious answer was for your relatives to be in no doubt about the veracity of your death, or, if there was some lingering doubt, for your relatives to be given explicit instructions how to eliminate any uncertainty. The writers, Wilkie Collins and Hans Christian Andersen, always carried letters detailing the elaborate precautions they expected their relatives to observe in order to guard against their premature burial. Other people resorted to stating in their wills that no one would benefit financially until the body had been made irrevocably a corpse. The last will and testament of Francis Duys, 19th century keeper of the manuscripts of the British Museum and benefactor of the Bodleian Museum, left his executors and no doubts as to his wishes. I give to Sir Anthony Carlisle £200, requesting him to sever my head or to extract the heart from my body so as to prevent any possibility of return of vitality. Harriet Martineau, the Victorian author, was dogged all her life by ill health and deafness, which may have contributed to the precision which she prepared for her death. It is my desire that my funeral shall be conducted in the plainest manner possible, and it is my desire, from an interest in the progress of scientific investigation, that my skull should be given to Henry George Atkinson of Upper Gloucester Palace, London, and also my brain, if my death should take place within such distance of the said Henry George Atkinson's then present abode as to enable him to have it for the purposes of scientific observation. There is no more definitive method of ensuring one's death than decapitation. In a similar vein, another Victorian, Miss Frances Power Code, had a last request designed to obviate the premature burial. Perform on my body the operation of completely and thoroughly severing the arteries of the neck and windpipe, nearly severing the head altogether, so as to make any revival in the grave absolutely impossible. And just in case the bereaved relatives choose to ignore her instructions, if this operation be not performed, and its completion witnessed by one or other of my executors, and testified by the same, I pronounce all bequests in this will to be null and void. Others put their faith in a homespun version of Middledorf's needle in the heart technique, though it takes little imagination to predict how this particular death insurance might go fatally awry. One such case was reported in the Undertakers and Funeral Directors Journal in 1889. Until about 40 years ago, a noted family of Virginia preserved a curious custom which had been religiously observed for over a century. Over 100 years ago, a member of the family died, and, upon being exhumed, was found to have been buried alive. From that time until about 1850, every member of the family, man, woman, or child, who died was stabbed in the heart with a knife and the hands of the head of the house. The reason for the cessation of this custom was that in 1850 or thereabouts, a beautiful young girl was supposed to be dead. The knife was plunged into her bosom, when she gave vent to a fearful scream and died. She had merely been in a trance. The incident broke her father's heart, and in a fit of remorse, he killed himself not long afterwards. For reasons that are not altogether obvious, the 19th century aristocrat Lady Burton, wife of the explorer Sir Richard, thought that it was infinitely preferable to be killed outright by an embalmer's injection, or even to come to life sliced by an anatomist's scalpel, than to recover consciousness underground. Hartmann quotes the case of a celebrated actress, Mademoiselle Rachel, who died in Paris in 1858 and awoke from her trance after the process of embalming had started. Her reprieve was ephemeral, since she succumbed 10 hours later as a result of the chemicals injected into her veins. Oh my goodness. Another famous case was Hannah Bestwick of Manchester. Having had a brother who narrowly escaped premature burial, she resolved that same fate would not befall her. Consequently, she bequeathed £250,000 to Dr. Charles White, head of the Manchester Royal Infirmary, on the condition that he embalmed her body. Each year, Dr. White and 2 witnesses had to check that the good lady was really dead. In 1829, the mummy was given to the Manchester Museum, and tradition has it that it was placed upright in a grandfather clock in the director's office. It was insured for £10. In 1868, Miss Beswick was finally given a decent burial. The risk of premature burial was increased in hot climates, since for hygienic reasons, it was unwise for a body to remain above ground for too long. In the past, in northern Italy, the interval between death and burial was decreed to be 48 hours. In southern Italy, this was reduced to 24 hours with a greater attending risk of burial alive. Waiting mortuaries. All the experts who wrote about the risk of premature burial seemed to agree on one thing, that putrefaction was the surest sign of irreversible death. Unfortunately, there were practical disadvantages in keeping the body of a loved one unburied until such time as it began to rot. Waiting mortuaries appeared to answer such aesthetic objections. Although conceived in France, waiting mortuaries made their first appearance in Weimar, Germany in 1791. For the twin reasons of hygiene and certification of death, such establishments received widespread approval. The 10 Munich mortuaries were held up as the finest of their kind. Initially, the removal of the dead to the mortuaries was optional, but following the cholera epidemic in 1869, it became obligatory. Within half an hour of a presumed death, the body was taken by a medical office to the nearest mortuary. The main hall, and this is a picture that we have here. Holy shnikes, this is weird. Okay, so the main hall at the Munich waiting mortuary, corpses rested on zinc trenches filled with antiseptic and camouflaged by flowers. An intricate system of cords and pulleys attached to fingers caused bells to ring in the porter's lodge if there was any movement of the corpse. Here's that picture. Ew. No bueno. The corpse, after being washed and dressed, was placed in a sloping position in the sarcophagus, under which was a zinc trench filled with antiseptic fluid. The hall was bedecked with sweet-smelling flowers, and the relatives were encouraged to take final photographs of the deceased. There were adjacent facilities for rich and poor, the only difference being the quality of the floral decoration. Oops. The bodies remained exposed for up to 72 hours. Less of signs of putrefaction appeared earlier. An intricate system of cords and pulleys was attached to the fingers of the corpse in such a way that the slightest movement caused bells to ring and attendants to come at the double. Staff were on duty 24 hours a day, made frequent inspections of the bodies, and were never allowed to leave for any reason whatsoever, unless substitutes took their place. Such was the sensitivity of the system that false alarms were common, usually caused by drops or the post-mortem movements of muscles. So creepy. It was not the theory behind the mortuaries, but rather the practical financial implications that fueled debate. Simply put, did such an expensive facility make financial sense? How many lives had been saved as a result of the use of waiting mortuaries? Opinions on this point varied from none to one to countless. Tebb, somewhat bashful, admits that there had been only a single unanswerable instance of recovery and imagines the septic crying, "What? Would you go to such pains and expense when the possibility of a mistake is probably only 1 in 50,000, or even more. Teb's answer is predictable. Yes, even if it were only 1 in 50 millions, that one is a living human soul. Borodell was just such a skeptic. He maintained that in 100-year history, there had been only one occasion when the bell had rung, and that was when an arm fell down with the relaxation phase that followed the passing off of rigor mortis. Teb's single case had a comico-tragic element. A little child, 5 years old, was carried to Leichenhauser mortuary, and the corpse was deposited as usual. The next morning, a servant from the mortuary knocked at the mother's house, carrying a large bundle in his arms. It was the resuscitated child, which she was mourning as lost. The child came to life in the mortuary by itself, and when the keeper saw it, it was playing with the white roses which had been placed on its shroud. Oh! The transports of joy that the mother experienced were so great that she fell down dead. Oh my goodness. Coffin devices. So, for this unfortunate to fall into a trance and revive in a coffin other than in Germany, all was not lost. They could always put their faith in an ingenious device invented in 1896 by Count Carnus Garnicki. So Count Carnus Garnicki's apparatus to prevent burial alive after a period of weeks, when it was safe to assume that death had indeed taken place, the vertical tube would be pulled from the coffin and reused. Oh my goodness, check this out. Could you imagine? I'd rather be dead. Just kill me already. Oh my goodness, that's crazy. So, Count Carnus Garnicki, Chamberlain to the Tsar of Russia, the Count had imagined the dilemma of someone's waking up buried in a coffin, 6 feet underground. By what of someone's waking up buried in a coffin? By what means could help be summoned? The apparatus he constructed consisted of a tube which passed vertically out of the coffin lid and opened in an airtight box above ground level. Sitting on the chest of the corpse was a glass sphere attached to a string which ran the length of the tube and was connected to a mechanism inside the box. The slightest movement of the chest was sufficient to move the sphere, which stretched the spring, which caused the lid of the box to fly open, to admit air and light. The spring would also activate a flag. Oh, thank you. I just got a Valentine. Oh, check it out. I got a little gummy Valentine. Anyways. So, the slightest movement of the chest was sufficient to move the sphere, which stretched the spring, which caused the lid of the box to fly open to admit air and light. The spring would also activate a flag, a light, and a loud bell to attract the attention of anyone wandering through the graveyard. The tube would act to amplify the feeble cries for help. The hire of such life insurance was deemed very reasonable, being roughly 12 shillings at the turn of the century. This would be well within the budget of all but the poorest, and would give one the use of the apparatus for 2 to 3 weeks. After that length of time, there was little likelihood of revival, and the tube could be pulled up and used in another coffin. The success rate of this device is not recorded, though it is not difficult to guess that most false alarms would be the result of moving muscles as rigor mortis faded, or else of abdominal eructations. So how many relatives, seeing the flag and hearing the bell, frantically dug down to their loved ones as a result of post-mortem breaking of wind? The more modest setup was devised in 1893 by John Wilmer of Stoke Newington, London, who is buried in his garden in Church Street. A switch in his hand was wired up to an alarm in the house. Fearing a technical failure, Wilmer enjoined that an annual inspection of the fittings be carried out. Not surprisingly, Edgar Allan Poe's cataleptic made much more elaborate contingency plans in case his condition was misdiagnosed as death. I doubted the fidelity of my dearest friends. I dreaded that in some trance of more than customary duration, they might be prevailed upon to regard me as irrecoverable. Anyways, paranoid and fearful to the end, the story continued. Among other things, I had the family vault so remodeled as to admit of being readily opened from within. The slightest pressure upon a long lever that extended far into the tomb would cause the iron portals to fly back. There were arrangements also for the free admission of air and light, and convenient receptacles for food and water, within reach of the coffin intended for my reception. This coffin was warmly and softly padded, and was provided with a lid fashioned upon the principle of the vault door, with the addition of springs so contrived that the feeblest movement of the body would be sufficient to set at liberty. Besides all this, there was suspended from the roof of the tomb a large bell, the rope of which it was designed should extend through a hole in the coffin, and so to be fastened to the one of the hands of the corpse. In 1896, an opportunistic quack, Arthur Lovell, set up a society ostensibly to decimate and share anxieties about being buried alive. The London Society for the Prevention of Premature Burial promised that the bodies of all members would be meticulously inspected by specially trained doctors before commitment to the sod. This might have passed as a laudable attempt to allay anxieties were it not for the fact that subscribers whose relatives failed to notify the society of their death, or those who failed to carry out Lovell's instructions to the letter, had their entire estates forfeited to the society. Holy shnikes, that's intense. Well, on that note, you guys, we are going to end our time reading Robert Wilkins' Death, A History of Man's Obsessions and Fears. It's been a pretty good book so far. I really enjoyed it. But we do have to go to our second music break. So on this break, we have once again Mr. Jeff Hilliard of Los Angeles with Multitude, Good Life, Cock That Heals, and then we have Miss Mia Savage with her band Antidote for Savages. She is from the Phoenix, Arizona area, but she goes back and forth from our area, which is the Durango area, during the summer, and then back to Phoenix during the winter. So she's our snowbird. And then we have Cockroach once again from the UK with We Play House. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
I got Mola moves, got that Mola too. You think it's wrong? Back of the head too long. Fuck that. Check these Mola moves. You need a Mola too. I can do no wrong. Back of the head long, never gonna cut it.
All these hookers sweet on me. Look at them chasing me, showing me that ass. And I banged up the snatch. I do this shit for free. Go down your mom, tell 3. She's taking selfies with the mullet like it's history. I can't outmaneuver you with that pussy, dude. You sit like Buddha waiting on it to come to you. My lines are straight to the point. She shows me gratitude. So what's your latitude? Let's adjust your attitude. What a alligator, double dually Lamborghini. All up in a silly little yellow polka dot bikini.
I got Mola moves, I got that Mola too. You think it's wrong? Back of the head too long. Fuck that.
What a alligator, double dually Lamborghini. All up in a silly little yellow polka dot bikini.
Check these Mola moves. You need a Mola too. I can do no wrong. Back of the head long, never gonna cut it.
Alligator, double dually Lamborghini. All up in a silly little yellow polka dot bikini. You're like the butt of a butter knife cutting up panini. So climb back in your kangaroo pouch like a rolling genie. These moves are hot, these locks I got. This power cannot be disputed and it can't be bought. So you can find me in the studio with all these thoughts. You wanna buy my style, but you can't do what you're not, neighbor.
I got Mola moves, I got that Mola too. You think it's wrong? Back of the head too long. Fuck that. Check these Mola moves. You need a Mola too. I can do no wrong. Back of the head long, never gonna cut it. Got that motherfucking ballin'. You wanna touch it?
Yeah. Next time you come around here with your bitch ass, just remember how my mullet makes your hoes pussy drip, drip, drip.
I got Mola moves, I got that Mola too. You think it's wrong? Back of the head too long. Fuck that. Check these Mola moves. You need a Mola too. I can do no wrong. Never gonna cut it. I got Mola moves, I got that Mola too. You think it's wrong? Back of the head too long. Fuck that. Check these Mola moves. You need a Mola too. I can do no wrong. Back of the head long. Never gonna cut it. Never gonna cut it. Never gonna cut it.
Drip, drip,
Mola moves.
Some Mola, bitch.
Mola moves.
drip, drip.
Mola moves. Never gonna cut it.
Excuse me! Excuse me! You got a cigarette? Hey, you help a guy out with some spare change. Anything will do, man. Oh, God bless. Can I just get your change? I missed the bus. I got these 6 right there. I'm running out moving like a steak knife.
This is the good life.
desperate and pathetic. Nothing but a coward. You're a fool with nothing to offer. No one will ever believe you. They see you for what you are. You're just a fraud, a shell of a person. And now the despair to penetrate the demons that have you. They enslave you to the doctor of the hate. I am the son of a...
We play house. We play house.
Welcome back, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me once again on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. We've had Story Time with me, TessaTNT, and we read from the Book of Death. Oh shit. The history of man's obsessions and fears. And now I'm kind of torn, and I just said this in the chat room, I'm kind of torn between ghost stories and the Mandela effect. So what do you guys think? What would you rather hear? So yeah, the Mandela effect really has my ear. I'm very intrigued by that. I know there's a lot of that stuff going on. People having one thing and it turns into two, and it could be the opposite of each thing. It's like, did this come from a different dimension, or what the fuck is going on? It's pretty intriguing if you really think about it. Oh, what is this? Cornucopia evidence. But I'm kind of scared to go between that and ghost stories, because I love ghost stories. I really do. But I must say, the Mandela effect really, really gets me. So maybe we'll read from this Mandela effect thing for a little bit, and then we'll go back to ghost stories. Fruit of the Loom's logo was initially a cornucopia swollen with an apple, green grapes, purple grapes, and their green leaves. Then it said, in Florida today, on 14 October 1994, there was published an article on the actor Sam Wright, who played the purple grapes in the 140 Fruit of the Loom commercials. I don't know. Maybe we'll go back to ghost stories. But this one is pretty interesting, and it's a discussion. It's by you/Good Times Fox. I genuinely can't believe that Chris Evans' movie Playing It Cool exists. I came across this movie for the first time 2 days ago, and I was so weirded out. I've never heard of it, and when I watched the trailer, it seemed so fake to me. Not sure how to explain it. I've never really experienced something directly that I describe as a Mandela effect until this. It really just felt like the movie didn't exist before, but I know that sounds dumb. And a lot of these Mandela effects too is like Fruit Loops. Like, is it F-R-O-O-T or is it F-R-U-I-T? Fruit Loops, or is it Bernstein Bears or Berenstein Bears? What the crack? Curious George, did he have a toe? Did he not? Shazam, that was another one. I remember that movie, and yes, this certain actor did play it, and then he's like, I never played that role. I know I saw you in this movie back in the 90s, but this is a long post. Well, over the character limit, consider this part 1. I'll add the rest in the comments. Part 1. I first heard of this Emmy in late 2016, early 2017. Like most people, when the Amelia Tate article broke, the story went viral. All I really remember thinking is, that sounds kind of familiar, like a lot of us. I assumed it was probably just a false memory. And for whatever reasons, we're all creating this fictional Sinbad genie movie in our minds. Confabulation or what have you. But I've come to the conclusion over the years of looking into it that this probably isn't the case. I really do think that there's a Sinbad genie movie. I fucking watched it. Now they're saying it's Shazam. No, it was Sinbad. It wasn't the what is his name? Anyways, it's the remake was with Shaquille O'Neal. It wasn't originally Shaquille O'Neal. It was man, what was his name? I can't remember. But he was an actor who was a comedian and whatever. It was not Shaquille O'Neal. So I've come to the conclusion over the years of looking into it that this probably isn't the case. I really do think there's a Sinbad movie out there, and yes, it's called Shazam. I should start by clarifying that I'm hesitant to claim the title of experiencer on this one. I simply have a vague sense of familiarity with it. I felt as though when the story first went viral, it simply wasn't the first time I had encountered Sinbad playing a genie. And that is who it was. It was Sinbad. I never would have generated the title on my own, nor do I have any memory whatsoever of watching it, well I do, seeing an advertisement, having a conversation about it, or anything at all, really. Just a feeling that it rang a bit of a bell. There are other Emmys, the Tinkerbell dots the I logo, for instance, that I actually have. Yeah, she would fly around and she'd go tink, and she'd dot the I on Disney. Is that not a real thing? Because she did it. Oh my gosh. Hold on, I'm trying to find my place again. So I should clarify by clarifying that I'm hesitant to claim the title of experiencer, blah, blah, blah. Yep. That's it. Yep. Neither do I have the memory whatsoever of watching it, seeing an advertisement, having a conversation about it, or anything at all, really. Just a feeling that it rang a bit of a bell. There are other Emmys, the Tinkerbell thing, that I actually have a clear memory of that I can play in my head. Run the tape. Let's rewind and go back. However, in an important sense, I do think this makes me an experiencer, at least for this particular Mandela effect. The reason being, that's how the vast majority of people seem to relate to it. I've scoured subreddits, social media pages, message boards, Quora questions, anything and everything I can find online to hear from experiencers. The overwhelming category of witness is simple. They are people like me. They just kind of remember Sinbad as a genie, and little, if anything else. No, he was totally the genie. It wasn't Shaquille O'Neal, it was Sinbad. Some think this is telling if there is no such movie, then that would certainly explain why the vast majority of people can't recall much besides Sinbad as a genie, and maybe the title, catchphrase being Shazam. But I think this lack of specificity among most witnesses points elsewhere. It seems that we're dealing with a specific type of experience, at least for most people, something that they encountered very briefly, maybe only seconds, minutes of their lives, decades ago. Not only does this explain the lack of detail among most experiencers, it's almost explaining why so many people think Sinbad played a genie, often agreeing on the title Shazam. The prior hypothesis, simply that no such thing ever existed in any sense of the word exists, doesn't have the ability to do that. I would summarize the eyewitness evidence as follows. We have thousands of unique accounts on the internet. It's truly pointless to do a literal head count. There are far too many that claim, with varying degrees of specificity and certainty, to remember Sinbad playing a genie in a movie. He did. These are the three fundamental characteristics that define Shazam Mandela effect. 1. It was a movie. 2. It starred Sinbad. It did. 3. Sinbad played a genie. Virtually all experiencers agree on at least these 3 points. The title being Shazam is sort of the second tier of shared belief. There are many who don't remember the title at all, and a few who believe it was something different, but I would also number the amount of experiencers who think it was called Shazam in the thousands, and it vastly outweighs any other proposed title. The next question is conceptually simple, and I believe we have arrived at a pretty obvious hypothesis. The question would be, what is the simplest way to explain this? What hypothesis best explains the data? The unequivocal non-existence of any such piece of media is often suggested. The problem with this hypothesis, there's simply way too many people sharing the same false memory. If this were a normal function of social psychology, it would be happening all the time. Like, how can you confuse Shaquille O'Neal with, what is happening? Anyways. Hello, beautiful sister Sandra. Yeah, how can you, confuse Sinbad with Shaquille O'Neal? There's a big fucking difference, seriously. Alright, so many often suggest we're getting our memories confused with Kazam the Genie movie starring Shaq. But why are so many of us getting that confused in such a specific way? Why so many insisting it was a different film altogether? Why not just Sinbad starting in Kazam? Why Shazam? It was Kazam. Why not Kazoom or Bazam? We should also expect thousands of people to swear up and down that Jim Carrey played a swinging London spy named Boston Flowers. Shut up, that's Austin Powers by Michael Myers. Anywho's. Or that Shaq starred in a movie with Bugs Bunny called Starbam. Dude, I totally remember that one too. Obviously, things like this almost never happen. But Michael Jordan did that too. He did a cartoon movie. I believe Shaquille O'Neal did that, and then Michael Jordan did it as well. Not with the quantity and quality of experiencers, so I don't think this is a very satisfactory explanation. Another proposed explanation, less often mentioned but conceivable nonetheless, is that somehow this is a mass psyop or disinformation project. We know that actors inside governments do in fact do things like this. It's well documented as a matter of public record. Maybe not like this exactly, but media-based disinformation campaigns certainly. I don't think this satisfies criteria very well either. We could wonder whether the vast majority of online accounts claiming such a memory are bots or paid stooges. But that doesn't explain why we see obviously real people, TV anchors, celebrities, people we know personally, etc., also sharing their false memories of such a movie, and it wouldn't explain why Sinbad himself has mentioned several times being confronted in person by 90s kids and or their parents asking him about the genie he never played. He gets so pissed off about this. Dude, I know Sinbad played it. That's the movie I watched. I actually watched it a handful of times. Don't know about you guys, but I did. There are simply way too many real human beings out there for this to be the case. It's common to find a user on, say, Twitter, who mostly tweets about sports randomly weighing in, Sinbad never played a genie? Mind blown. Most of these are pretty obviously really real people, so I can't really accept the idea that there is no massive shared false memory of Shazam. I think that one could be essentially tossed out. Dude, Sinbad actually did it. And I'm gonna type back in case you don't see me, but hello, beautiful sister Sandra. And her name was Cassandra. Love you, sister. Glad you're here. But yeah, that shit's real. And I know Shaquille O'Neal was like the replacement dude, but at the same time, seriously, don't give me that shit. It was Sinbad. Sinbad actually played the original genie. This is fucking insane. What the crap is happening? Why am I here in this crazy, crazy universe? This light is too bright. And these bags are insane. I need more sleep. So this one is Rihanna tonight. I could have sworn she was just pregnant with her first child. Yes, wasn't she? Now she's not? What the fuck? Banjo hurts his foot in the Banjo-Kazooie intro. What? Does anyone remember this also? I always remembered in the intro for Banjo-Kazooie when Mumbo brought out his xylophone when Banjo kicked it. Y'all see that it flew away? Well, I could have swore I remember Banjo holding his foot and jumping because his foot hurt, like, ouch, 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 kicking the xylophone. I don't know about that one. Oh, Phoebe. Okay, so what's this one? This is by /Ass Condom. Damn, that's a crazy name. Anyways, I know a lot of hardcore Phoebe Bridgers fans will tell me otherwise, but I distinctly remember her name being Phoebe Bridges without the R. Let's move on. Reboot. Bill Pullman. I watched Casper around Halloween 2 years ago and remember it being a bit of a sad ending considering how Bill Pullman died in 2015. I checked it on Wiki, IMDb, and yep, he definitely died, so it was pretty strange to see him play the lead in the new Netflix series Sinners, which was released lately, and no, not confusing him with Bill Paxton. Holy shit. So kinds of crazy shit happening. What happened to Popeye's mascot? I don't know why, but I remember that they had a mascot. She was kind of a mob of the KFC mascot and Aunt Jemima. If you remember her, please respond. Oh, somebody just responded. The same thing happened with the Geico caveman. Marketing opted to go in a different direction after some time, probably after her contract ended. This is life. Such is life. This one is by /Raw RSAUR 96. Is there a place to post personal Mandela effects? I've got a couple of Mandela effects that are very specific to me. I have genuine, real anchoring memories to tie these certain things to a certain time period in my memory. I know that most people won't agree with me though. Is there a place where I can post being or about Mandela effects without getting downvoted to hell? And somebody is posting back. Okay, there's a whole conversation. Let's go somewhere else. One fizzling out. In the Tinkerbell intro, yeah, she did have that. She's like, she went to light the eye, her wand fizzled out, and then she'd like try to redo it, and then it finally started working again, and then she was able to tap the eye. Do you guys remember that or no? I totally remember Tinkerbell flying in, and she's like, Tink! And then sometimes her wand fizzled out, so she'd be like, you know, trying to fix it, and then she'd do the thing. So I will tell you this exactly as I remember it. I'm not talking about the famous Tinkerbell intro where she dots the eye. This is different. Okay, when I was a kid, I watched Tinkerbell movies religiously. Never in DVD or VHS. This was a little bit past the time. I also never watched Peter Pan or Cinderella. I've also seen the intro for Miley Cyrus where her wand fizzles out, but this is not the same. Let me set the scene. The background is dark. I believe dark blue or navy? Tinkerbell is flying. She attempts to draw the Disney logo, but her wand doesn't work and makes a sizzle sound. She gets frustrated and gets a little look on her face. I remember that. She's holding the wand in her left hand and hits it 2 or 3 times. That's what I'm saying. She's like, cat, 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 against her other hand, cat, 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 trying to fix it. Then she tries again and successfully draws the logo. Disney. I feel like the Disney intro song was playing in the background, but I'm less sure of that than everything else. It is seriously freaking me out that I can't find it anywhere. Also, when I mentioned it to my mom, she described the exact same scene to me because, like I said, I would watch Tinkerbell movies religiously, so she knew about it. I also watched the movies on Netflix, not anywhere else, ever. Only on Netflix. I was born in 2008, for context. I don't know, sister, but I remember that too. Oh, okay. To all you people that have kids out there or kids of the 90s, The Lion King. Simba's question to Scar. Do you guys remember this? I remembered that when I watched for the first or second time the first meeting between Scar and Simba, they were talking to each other, and suddenly Simba asked Scar where he got his scar, but I think Scar didn't answer him. I've watched the movie many times, and when I decided to play it from a disc that I watched the same part, this question from Simba to Scar was not there. I decided to check on the internet, but I didn't see anything there either. Does anybody remember this? And I do, like, he asked a question and then Scar just like, you know, prosperously or whatever, however you say it, like, just kind of turned around and did something else. Everyone's been wrong about the Fruit of the Loom layout. Really? So this one is by you/Mizo_soup. Everyone's been wrong about the Fruit of the Loom logo? I don't know. So I remember seeing a YouTube video talking specifically of this Mandela effect. However, in the video, it seems somewhat like this. If people recall a cornucopia of Fruit of the Loom, when not other things such as an ocean spray, etc., that wrong, indeed, I do associate it with fruit, just like an example, Thanksgiving. It was kind of like that Thanksgiving horn where the fruit would kind of like spill out, is what I remember. I don't know about you guys. Gotta get further away from the camera. I look nasty. Okay, so that wrong indeed, I do associate it with fruit. Just take an example, Thanksgiving. Why hasn't it just been said as this? People have associated the Fruit of the Loom logo with a cornucopia because it's confused with the typical paintings of Thanksgiving images. Dude, it used to be the cornucopia with all the fruit spilling out of it. Now it's just fruit. It's changed. I just figured they changed their logo. I don't know. It can be easily confused because none of the videos were wrong. I do in fact associate fruits and vegetables with cornucopia, so I would assume the rest or many people do as I do. I don't know. I remember I used to have the cornucopia and the fruits and vegetables would be spilling out. Don't know about you guys, but that's what I remember. Hell yeah. Spider-Man Remastered. Ooh, somebody thinks they found a new Mandela effect. This is by you/It's me, bitch. I think I found a new Mandela effect. Does anyone remember a robot being on Mars in 1997? Specifically, Pathfinder apparently was on Mars in 1997. I was under 10, but I specifically remember it being a huge deal when Spirit and Opportunity were launched because the commentary surrounding it was, OMG, we're going to Mars. I remember all this scrutiny regarding G, how they would revolutionize it, was that we had landed on Mars. Now I'm being told that Pathfinder was on Mars in 1997. Comments? Memories? Anyone? What's the ME here? Oh, well, maybe she thinks it was a false memory, but it wasn't. Nightmare on Elm Street. Oh my gosh, guys. That is one of my favorite horror flicks. I love Jason. I love Michael. I love Freddy. They're amazeballs. So this one is by you/CyberKing21. Oh shit. So Nightmare on Elm Street Mandela Effect, Glenn Lance TV. I remember at one point the TV being black. Now it's another color. Does anybody else remember this? I could have the scene confused with another scene from this movie or another. Am I misremembering, or has the Mandela effect struck? I don't know, bitch. Generally, TVs are black. Maybe they're gray. I don't know. Tyson versus Douglas, now in Tokyo? What? I keep liking these things nobody else likes, but I like things that I read. So the infamous Mike Tyson versus Buster Douglas fight now took place in Tokyo, Japan on February 11th, 1990. Many people remember the fight taking place in a different location, with some recalling it taking place in Las Vegas. Tyson, who was the reigning heavyweight champion at the time, was heavily favored to win the fight. However, Douglas shocked the world by knocking out Tyson in the 10th round to become the new heavyweight champion. Anyone else remember this taking place? Anyone? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what is happening. So here's another one showing some of these Star Wars vehicles. This is by you, aggravating-alarm-16. I believe some effects are the result of being misinformed originally. I posted something about this a while back, but I forgot to add the pictures for reference. So if you go on to Reddit and you look under Mandela effects, you'll see this. And it's spacecraft, and it looks like it's in front of Mars. I don't know. I had a toy as a child that I swear was an X-Wing launcher, and that's what these are. They're X-Wings. 1980s, when I went to go to find it as an adult, I could not. It could not be found. Asked lots of toy shops and Star Wars collectors. No one remembered anything like it. When the wings are together, it's gray ship with an orange-red stripe. Dude, those totally existed. Like my cousins. So my uncle was Dave Thomas, the founder of Wendy's. My uncle Clayton actually worked for him. He was like kind of like his sidekick, his wing guy. And his kids had all the fucking Star Wars toys. And they did have X-Wings. Did they not? Do you guys not remember this? This is insane. So when the wings are together, it's gray. It's a gray ship with orange-red stripe, with a long nose and triangle-shaped rear. This is a Battlestar Galactica Viper ship. It's a gray ship with an orange-red stripe. I remember it being white with the orange, with a long nose and a triangle-shaped rear. While as an adult, there is clearly a difference. However, a childhood memory from 20 years ago could allow the toy or the two to be mixed up, especially when the toy was bought at a yard sale. This is the toy I had as a child. It's a space station that launches small gray ships with a red-orange stripe. I do believe that the effect is real. However, I also think that sometimes people are just remembering or misinformed. But no, these ships, they weren't gray, they were like white. If they were gray, it was like a whitish gray, and they did have that orange stripe on them. I totally fucking remember that. I think it's more white than gray. So this one is by you / it started in 2012. National Lampoon's Vacation Hotel Hell. As I have stated on my page many times, I believe that most, if not all, Mandela effects have something to do with God or the devil, this being another example. I'd first off like to say I've seen all the vacation movies dozens of times, if not more. There were several Mandela effects in the movies alone, but I will just stick to this one as I feel it is the most significant off the top of my head. But anyways, when the Christmas Vacation 2 Mandela effect is floating about, I extensively researched everything the franchise had ever released, and National Lampoon's Vacation Hotel Hell was not one of them. I don't remember that. Do you guys? Leave a comment below. Let me know. I don't remember Hotel Hell. But I'm trying to think. I don't know, maybe she's thinking about Little Nicky or something? Because there was kind of like a Hotel Hell, and You know, that guy got the pineapple shoved up his ass every day. That was cool. Then one day, this came up on YouTube. So I went back to my original places of research for everything to do with the franchise, and I was on every single one. I checked like I had always done, and it had always been there. I know this Hotel Hell popped up out of thin air. Please do not respond with, "It was a short film, so I probably just missed it," as I already explained how I exclusively researched the franchise extensively. Anyway, there is the Mandela effect. Anybody else notice this just pop up out of nowhere? God bless. So, Throwaway 9981 says, also a big Vacation fan here, and it was my understanding that until the 2015 revival movie, Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo had not reprised their roles as Clark and Ellen Griswold since Vegas Vacation 1997. Until just now, I've never heard of this advertised sponsors short film, despite the fact that I've watched every Super Bowl for at least the past 2 decades with an appreciation for the commercial humor. It's very hard to believe this would have flown under my radar for 13 years, so this would be a Mandela effect for me too. Here are a couple of links if anyone's interested. And yes, it says you can go to en.m.wikipedia.org/hotel_hell_vacation. Never fucking seen it. I'm kind of interested and I want to check it out, but I'm not going to do it right now because I have you guys on the line. But seriously, that's insane, babes. Okay, so have you ever watched a movie that doesn't exist? I don't think so. Not that I can recall, because there's lots of movies that I share with my kids, but let's see what they say. So, this is a topic that fascinates me. Most often, Mandela effects in the film space involve slight differences to movies known to exist. Just like, "Luke, I am your father." And then now it's like, "No, Luke, it is I am your father." "No, the fuck that ain't. It's Luke, I'm your father." It's been that way forever. Anyways, some examples include the Libyans driving the Toyota van in Back to the Future, actually a blue Volkswagen van. Forrest Gump saying, "Life is like a box of chocolates." He did say that. Darth Vader saying, "Luke, I am your father." Never happens, but I remember it. And T-Rex smashing through the visitor center in Jurassic Park. Yeah, that was like the intro. He's like, one of the advertisements. Not a thing. Seriously? But occasionally we see groups of people remembering a film that just literally doesn't exist. Some examples that can be found by searching through this stub. Back to the Future, Part 4. Shazam, the Sinbad Genie movie. I watched that one. It was Sinbad, not Shaquille. Brave 2. Batteries, still not included. A live-action Curious George film. I thought it'd be fun to thread and to ask the community if anybody else remembers a movie that doesn't exist. There are other examples than the ones provided above, of course, but if you feel like you've watched a non-existent movie, or at least remember trailers, posters, etc., please weigh in. I'm particularly interested in movies that aren't on the list I provided, but would also love to hear anything more from people who recall the ones mentioned. Chumba Casino, never mind. So, the Fun Parts 94 said, regarding the live-action Curious George, I thought I might have seen a trailer for that, but no. I was remembering the 2006 Jack Johnson music video for Upside Down, where Jack Johnson is very much a real dude in live action, and an animated Curious George is also there. I wonder if others are remembering that too. And then Dragon Station said, I'll look into that, thanks. I don't think so, though. There were several people who independently remembered Matthew Broderick as the guy and described a trailer in very similar detail to each other. This one may have been more of a trailer lead than a movie. So I know Matthew Broderick did play in like what was his fucking name? Oh, the freaking dinosaur thing that was like nuclearly masticized. Holy shit, I can't even think of the name. So there was a live action Inspector Gadget movie with Matthew Broderick, and he wears a similar outfit to the man in yellow. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, people have brought that up in some of the other threads. Experiencers aren't really going for it. They remember him wearing yellow, interacting with George, etc. There's even a pretty specific recap of the trailer that others recalled also. I'll see if I can find it. It's been discussed a lot on the sub and elsewhere. And Laughing Ashley said it came out around 2004 because Universal Studios redid their parking structure paint to have the Curious George theme. I think they anticipated a much bigger return. Nope, I definitely remember that. So that song is also in a 2006 Curious George movie that's animated. But it's weird because I remember the movie being live action too, but I also watched the music video, so I see how it could have been confabulated. The music video was so good. So Doing It Dirty said that and a lot of childhood books being made live action in the past 15 years. Mr. Popper's Penguins, Where the Wild Things Are, Paddington, Winnie the Pooh, conceivable people can get confused. And then Dragon Station said yes, and that's possible, but that could be evidence that in another timeline similar to others, it happened that way for that reason. What the fuck was that fucking dinosaur? Oh my god. This is really confusing me. Yep, my all the timer's just kicking it. Alright, let's see. Nope, not that one. Prodigy song. So, this is by the Magician card. And it says, Prodigy song. Smack My Bitch Up is a song by the Prodigy. Everyone knows that. However, I've met several people, including myself, who are absolutely convinced there was a clean version that went, take my picture, snap my picture. I vividly remember hearing it as a background track to a CBBC kids show, so they obviously wouldn't have used the original version. I could find zero record of the clean existence, and I 1000% did not just mishear the lyrics like everything. Okay, Google suggestions, anything, that'd be cool. Jim Beam Bourbon. Hello. It's always been Jim Beam, not Jim Bean. What the fuck? Yeah. Bevel Thompson said never and did this laughing thing. I had a collection of election year Jim Beam collectible bottles. They made a different bottle shaped like a donkey and another like an elephant for each election. Always Beam. It was never Bean. What the fuck? It's so nasty, how can you forget it? Like, I can smell it right now. It gets you baked. You must have always misheard. True, my mom used to pour it on my rice for dinner. Oh, is she trying to put you to sleep, boy? I don't know, that's weird. What the fuck? So this one is by u/potential_pirate 1985. Didn't one of Pamela Anderson's sons drown? I could have sworn one of Pamela Anderson's sons drowned when I was 9. So I was very surprised while watching her documentary on Netflix to see both of them are very much alive and well. The documentary was very interesting, by the way, and I don't know if you guys have heard, but Pam's been texting Tommy Lee and, talking to him about how he's her one and only true love, even though he's married. Leave it alone, bitch. So what is this? Shrek 2, I Need a Hero. Yes. The song I Need a Hero in Shrek 2 doesn't have Hit It Boys. It just has Hit It. Whatever. Let's move on. Grand Theft Auto. Hello everyone. I want to say something about Grand Theft Auto 5. Cutscene when... What the fuck? When you load in as Trevor, I remember Trevor skydiving with no parachute on, wearing a dress. My brother says he also remembers this. Is this real? I can't find it anywhere. Help me. Help me to know if it's real or not. I do remember that. He didn't have a parachute. He had a dress, and it was kind of like one of those squirrel suits. It was keeping him from falling too fast. I don't know. Elder Scrolls Daggerfall novel. Firstly, I'm not talking about Daggerfall Chronicles. The game guide or whatever it is, I have a vivid memory of finding a paperback novel called Daggerfall. The main character was female, and I specifically remember her referencing a Dwemer dagger. This was 20 to 25 years ago, and I never heard that word before and hadn't yet seen any of the Elder Scroll games. I only read the first 30-ish pages, and I remember being blown away about it. I found the book in a hospital waiting room in an area that had some random books and magazines. I kept the book and had it in my room. I went to read it more, and it was more than a couple of days later, and it disappeared. I've never found any reference to its existence, and it's driving me nuts. Neck and foots. I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't steal books from waiting rooms. Elvis Blue Suede Shoes. Oh yeah. I love Elvis. He was my first crush. Well, the title didn't change, but the song lyrics sure did. Yes, Elvis doesn't want you to step on his blue suede shoes now. The most of the song is shoe, no more S. I'm still cheesing because I just found this 10 minutes ago. Finally, one for my dad, Elvis fan, to choke on. So, NY Grove 23 said, just listened again due to the primitive recording technique, plus Elvis's tendency to snap back from the mic at the ends of phrases. It's true that some of them sound like shoe, but I just played it back and a bunch of them definitely sound like shoes. Plus, it's in the official sheet music and in Carl Perkins' original recordings. Unmistakable. Ain't no way you can mistake Elvis Presley stuff. Anywho's, you guys, I do believe that we are at the end of our time. Boy, should I get this books? Gotta get this book and this paper out of the way, but I want to thank you all again for joining me this evening on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Had a pleasure having you. Can't wait to do it again. Next weekend, we have Jay and Marie Yates on Sunday, and we have Mr. William Pattison on Sunday. But thank you to all of our friends on We Are Paradox Media's Facebook, KPNL Radio, Twitter, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and wherever else you may be listening beyond the Omniverse tonight. I had a wonderful time. And yeah, like I said, next weekend, it's going to be epic. Don't forget, you guys, we are all in this together. Together, we can make the world a little better. And together, my friends, we are Paradox Media, because without you, there is no us. We don't do Skype after parties on Sundays anymore, but if you want to join us on Saturdays, look me up at TessaTNT.Thomas30 or give us a little jingle jangle, 970-335-9596. Until next time, nighty night, love and light to all of my gentle folks out there. You guys take care of my youths, and I will see you back here, same time, same crazy place.